Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's League of Women Voters Candidates Forum. This forum is featuring candidates for State Representative Position 1 for Washington's 24th Legislative District. This district covers the entire Olympic Peninsula and Pacific Coast communities down to ocean shores, all of Clallam County, all of Jefferson County, and the northern part of Grays Harbor County. This is a 90-minute online and on-the-air forum. My name is Shelley Reese Randall. I'm a member of the Jefferson County League of Women Voters, and I'm pleased to be your moderator tonight. Joining me are 4 of the 5 candidates running for a 2-year term for the House of Representatives seat being vacated by Mike Chapman. 2 will advance from the primary election, which is August 6th, to the general election. The candidates with me tonight are in alphabetical order, and I'll just ask you to give a little wave for the viewing audience. Adam Birnbaum prefers the Democratic Party. Eric Pickens prefers the Democratic Party. Matthew or Matt Robertson prefers the Republican Party. And Nate Tyler prefers the Democratic Party. J.R. Streifel, who prefers the Republican Party, declined to attend. We are grateful that all of you are here, and we look forward to an enlightening evening of voter education. I want to say that this forum is a collaboration of the League of Women Voters, Jefferson County, the League of Women Voters, Clallam County, our media partner, KPTZ 91.9 FM, Port Townsend's Community Radio, and our tech partner, the North Olympic Library System. A video recording of this forum will be available in a few days on both of the League's websites and YouTube channels. Yes, we are that up to date. So just go to YouTube and search League of Women Voters, Jefferson or Clallam counties. You will find us. Those of you listening on the radio who are interested in watching the candidates in action, you can find the Zoom link to join this meeting on any of the forum partners' websites. And for those of you on the Zoom, if you have any technical difficulties, you can jump over to the radio and listen to the audio via KPTZ at 91.9 FM or streaming at kptz.org. So whether you are joining us live or watching the recording later, we're glad you're here. Voting is a cornerstone of our democracy. And here in the 24th Legislative District, we are fortunate to have an engaged electorate. You see, over the past month, we asked for and received questions in advance from the community. 57 in all. So are we going to get to all 57 questions tonight? No, don't worry, we'd be here a very long time. But we have done our best to collate a good sampling of the questions, checking them against the job descriptions, first of all, to make sure that they were actually things you could comment on and would have relevancy to. And we grouped them via themes. So when multiple people submitted similar questions, we did our best to combine them for brevity. And yet we hope you will still sense that some of the personality of the questioner is coming through. The questions are also spread out between this forum and the other 2 primary forums. So there is a candidates forum for State Representative Position 2 on July 18th, and the forum for the candidates for State Senator will be 2 nights hence on July 11th. Find all the dates and times on our websites. The questions have not been shown to or shared with the candidates prior to me speaking them on tonight's forum, so they will be new to them. And we'll try to get through as many of the questions as possible in the time we have tonight. Now, before we went live, we made sure all of the candidates were able to see our 2-minute timer, and now we'd like to put that timer to use. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for his opening statement, and then also 2 minutes for a closing statement. In between, we'll have questions, and each candidate will again have 2 minutes for a response. If a candidate has extra time remaining, he may choose to return to a previous question and elaborate further. Up to you. We will use the order in which the candidates appear on the Clallam County primary ballot. Because you are listed first on the ballot, candidate Robertson, please unmute yourself. You will be going first with your opening statement. Please tell us why you're running, what your qualifications are, and what goals you have for your time in office if elected.
Thank you, Shelley, and thank you to the organization sponsoring this forum and partnering with the forum to get it done. My name is Matthew Robertson. I'm running for state representative, position 1, as Shelley said. Currently, I serve as a deputy prosecuting attorney for Clallam County. I work in the criminal division where I prosecute a wide range of felonies from everything from forgery and vehicular assault to homicides and crimes against children. My wife and I have lived here since 2016. We finished up in working in Alaska for the Alaska court system, where I was a deputy magistrate and law clerk, and decided to return to Western Washington, where we both grew up. We love it here. It's amazing. It's good to be home and to settle here. In 2022, we welcomed our daughter Nadia. I'm running because I've had the opportunity to live the American dream. I started out from a family that dealt with issues of poverty and homelessness, often having to either stay at a motel or couch surf or live in somebody's attic. My family dealt with my mom having addiction to pain pills. And, from the outset, I've been able to get a good education through Washington schools, and then ended up going to college and being an attorney and serving the community as a deputy prosecutor. It's been amazing. And I want to make sure those same opportunities are available for future Washingtonians like my daughter and other folks' grandkids and children. When I look around and see the problems we're facing in cost of living, public safety, housing, childcare, and schools, I want to tackle those issues and make sure we leave a better Washington than what we have now. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will hear the opening statement from candidate Birnbaum.
Thanks, Shelley. My name is Adam Birnbaum, and thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm running for office to fight for rural communities on the peninsula and across the state. These communities are too often ignored in Olympia by policymakers who care more about Tacoma and Seattle than Tuchola and Sequim. I grew up in rural Washington. I grew up in a home where my mom struggled with a substance use disorder and a gambling addiction, and my dad had a union job as a high school counselor. That job gave my family stability. It gave us second chances and soft landings. When I've talked to people across the peninsula working for Derek Kilmer and Kevin Vandeweghe, I've heard stories that starkly illustrate what's at stake. Too many people can't find an affordable home, and even if they can't find a union job, or at least one that has benefits and pays a living wage. And even if they can find that, they can't afford childcare and the increasing cost of living. We deserve an honest and informed discussion of the problems in our community and their potential solutions. People want a candidate who puts community before party. The problems in our community are too serious and the stakes are too high for partisan gamesmanship that puts rhetoric over results and cheap one-liners over good faith critique. The stakes are too high. If we elect politicians without substantive ideas to improve our community, kids will end up in situations like the one I was in as a kid. They'll grow up in homes where parents will struggle to put food on the table, where well-paying jobs are scarce, where affordable housing is a constant challenge. They deserve better. And that's why I'm running for state representative. I'm running to lower the cost of housing for everyone, so senior citizens can age with dignity and young families can afford to buy their first homes. I'm running so young families can afford childcare, so young women aren't forced to choose between starting a family and starting their career. I'm running to create well-paying jobs, repairing our aging roads and ferries, to give young people a career right here on the peninsula, to fix our healthcare system so senior citizens don't face a revolving door of new physicians, and so people with behavioral health problems can get the care they need. That is the vision of the future I've heard from people across the peninsula. It's a vision I believe in too, and it's why I'm running for office. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Pickens, please go ahead with your opening statement.
Thank you, Shelley. My name is Eric Pickens, and I am an elementary teacher in the Port Angeles School District. I am also the Sequim School District School Board President, and I'm a regional union president for the Washington Education Association. Basically meaning that I am the leader of the political and legislative priorities for educators on the Olympic and Kitsap Peninsula. And probably most importantly, I'm a husband and a father. I grew up here on the Olympic Peninsula and graduated from Chimacum High School. Right out of high school, I enlisted in the United States Coast Guard. I'm a first-generation college graduate. And after receiving my master's degree in education, I became a teacher and have been serving the Port Angeles School District for the last 10 years. I am committed to advocating outside of the classroom, which is why I currently serve as a union leader and also a school board member. And with so many of our children, families experimenting the effects of housing insecurity, I truly believe that we need to advocate for these issues on a broader level. Obviously, I am passionate about fully funding public education. In my conversations with constituents, they've made it very clear that we also need to prioritize economic stability and workers' rights, healthcare accessibility, and affordable housing, both availability and accessibility. To make sure that we are successfully represented, I want to fight for not just educators, but also all constituents in the 24th. I have successfully represented educators, but I want to bring that to a broader level so I can support all the priorities that the constituents have in the 24th District. And with your help, I want to be that champion down in Olympia. Thank you, and I'm very excited to be here.
And finally, candidate Tyler, may we have your opening statement?
Okay, I do appreciate that. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for putting this forum on. I do appreciate it. Nate Tyler from Nia Bay, born and raised, going to be buried here on the peninsula. My roots run deep. Being a lifelong resident, I've lived this life, the life that each and every one of us face. And I think that's important. I have 12 years of leadership, elected leadership as the chairman of the Makah Tribe, vice chairman of the Makah Tribe, working with state officials, federal officials, working in the healthcare field, housing, transportation, courts, education, natural resources, being a natural resources tribe. So being a co-manager with the state of Washington, working with fisheries issues, salmon, halibut, and also logging, being dependent on natural resources. As far as being a tribal leader, I'm also a community member and being a part of the community. I coached 12 years of sports from youth all the way to high school. My wife and I have been married 28 years. We were a foster placement for children. Knowing how important it is for kids to have a safe home, we brought in about 24 kids. So we've been a part of the community. We live this life. We live the ups and downs that many our residents face. And I think that's important. Some of the biggest issues that I want to address are issues that I've been addressing as a tribal leader. That's access to mental health, access to behavioral health treatment, especially with the opioid epidemic that we see today. Lack of housing, access to housing, transitional housing, public safety is another big issue, and Head Start and childcare is one of my top 4 issues. So I do appreciate this. Thanks.
Thank you all. So we're going to turn now to questions because we have so many of them. And I know this is a chance for you to really let your policy roots shine. Let us know what you care about and what you are knowledgeable about. I'm very impressed already with the qualifications of this group. So just a point of procedure, we'll alternate who answers the questions first. So since candidate Roberson started, we will now start the first question by having candidate Birnbaum start, followed by candidate Pickens, Tyler, Roberson, and we'll keep rotating. So you'll always follow the same candidate. All right, well, from those 57 questions, a committee has culled the following. The number one most mentioned topic was around climate change. And of course, that affects our natural resources greatly. So the first question is, what do you see as the biggest water issues that our area is facing? What are some possible solutions? And how will you build consensus around those solutions? biggest water issues, possible solutions, building consensus. Candidate Birnbaum, you take the lead.
Thanks for the question, Shelley. When I think about the biggest water issues facing our community, I think about a couple things. One is aquaculture. I think there's an ongoing conversation about the role of fishing and fisheries. And I think that it's not a straightforward question. You hear from a lot of people in the community who talk about the need to embrace newer aquaculture practices to bring fish pens back in. I'm personally of the opinion that that technology isn't quite there yet. But I think that it's important that when we're having this conversation, we don't just rely on our own gut checks or instincts. I'd want to make sure that I was having conversations with our tribal partners to see what their perspective is. Tribes on the peninsula have significant management responsibilities for many of our wetlands and much of our coastland, and I would want to make sure that they were a part of that conversation. I think another important issue when we're talking about conservation of water resources is the number of water rights that have been assigned to different homes, different new developments across the peninsula. I've seen studies that suggest that we've already over-allocated water rights and that in 15 or 20 years, we won't have enough water to maintain the population that's here now. My impression, talking to people, in particular those at the North Olympic Land Trust, is that as time goes on, we are going to be one of the most attractive destinations across the United States for people who are going to be refugees from climate change. And that's going to create a tremendous amount of pressure in how we allocate these systems. To me, one of the things that we need to make sure we do is develop in an intelligent way. We have to make sure that the developments that we have don't continue to spread, in particular, into our wetlands, into farmlands. There's no better way to destroy the water preserving quality of soil than to put a suburb on top of it. So in a way, one of the things that we can do is make sure that as we develop housing policy, we're thoughtful, we build with density. That's important for us to preserve some of the water stock. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you. Candidate Pickens, let's hear your thoughts on this question of water.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. When I think about water quality and water conservation, it's interesting because I think part of the question was about how we come to consensus on that, and it's interesting to me because how much more of a basic right can it get to the need for water? I think about water quality, and it's something that we all need. Unfortunately, here on the Olympic Peninsula, we're limited by the amount of sources that we have. In some areas, I know Port Angeles, for example, they're really limited by just one water source. And I believe that we need to have the strongest regulations around protecting water, making sure that we have clean, available drinking water, not only for us as individuals, but also for our environment. For me, I don't know that there's a more fundamental issue than, I mean, it kind of goes along with protecting our planet, but obviously when we talked about protecting our planet, it's specifically around our ability to maintain, to keep this going for generations to come. And I also think about climate change mitigation overall. I think that if we continue to exploit resources more and more, we are going to continue to damage our water sources. Right now, I think there's times when we're looking at timber harvests that are extremely close to some of our most crucial water sources. For me, we have to protect water sources. We need to basically make sure that we stabilize our water cycle. We need to we depend on snow, we depend on water, and that's how we get through till the summer. And so it's a critical resource that we can't take for granted. So both just for our own sake, but also for the environment. Thank you.
And next, candidate Tyler, your thoughts, please.
Okay, so I do appreciate that question. Climate change is a humongous issue that, it's almost too late to take a stance on. We've been pushing the climate change issue for quite some time directly with Governor Inslee. We as tribes actually had an initiative, I-1631, that failed. But today, an outside millionaire is coming to Washington State telling us what's best for us. And we can't allow that. And we have to vote down the Climate Commitment Act initiative. That's the first thing. So our biggest water issue, there's numerous issues there as far as water. We don't have a snowpack. We don't have the snowpack that we once had. We're starting to take down dams. So the grid is going to take on a larger source of producing power. So we're going to have problems without being in a position to look at renewable energies. Washington State really hasn't been doing much as far as renewable energies from what I've seen. And water for the salmon. We had the culvert case that ties into water, that ties into the salmon, the survival of the salmon. And as a co-manager with Washington State, water is everything for us. And we have way too many communities that are lacking water. The Makah tribe's actually one of them. And for the last couple of years, we worked directly with the federal government and was able to work with the Biden administration to allocate appropriations to deal with our water problem here. So it's going to be an issue because of climate change in more communities and because of growth. So voting down the Climate Commitment Act, I think, is most important.
Thank you. And finally, candidate Robertson.
Thank you. So, for me, it's significant. Washington State as a whole has 28,000 miles of shoreline. That's important. Water is who we are as a state. It's important for trade, for drinking, sustainability, the salmon populations, agriculture. And so, first on water issues, we have an issue with pollution. Even though I think overall we've done a good job as a state targeting air quality, we're lagging behind in water quality. 50% of our stream miles, 1/5 of our marine waters fail federal standards. That's an area where I'd like to see science-based funding decisions made, as well as more funding directed at salmon habitat restoration. That's an area where we're lagging behind. Nate mentioned the culvert replacement. Eventually, that's something we have to get done. It's a court order, and we put it off for years under the current majority in the state house, and we haven't been getting it done. Ultimately, there is only so much water. That's particular at issue as we look for where we're going to build more houses. I don't think we have to bottle up development, but I do think we need to look at coordinated planning and integrating, business and agriculture more on the peninsula, similar to what have been done in some communities like Yakima, for example, where they've started to plan long-term as far as, okay, we need more reservoirs, we need to increase stream flow in certain areas. And I think as a region, we can do that better. And that's something I would look to help with in the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you all. Excellent. We'll move on to our next question, which candidate Pickens will start us off with. Sticking with the water theme, we get around on the water with ferries. So we have a question about the Washington State ferry system. As we know, it's the largest in the nation, and it is struggling right now to maintain service. Issues that include breakdowns, chronic shortages of ferries and crew, and curtailed schedules are affecting the economic well-being of the Olympic Peninsula and island communities. What do you propose to address this? Candidate Pickens.
Thank you. I appreciate this question. My entire family are retired Washington State ferry workers, so this one is very near and dear to my heart. Going back to my great-grandmother, as a matter of fact. And This is absolutely an area that we need to address, and quite frankly, it is going to require additional investments. This is even for constituents here that live in the 24th that never step foot on the ferry. I think one of the pieces that we need to understand is how vital it is to our economy here in the 24th. Right now, with the unreliability of the ferries, we have folks that are making choices not to visit the Olympic Peninsula anymore. And to me, I believe that is going to have a drastic impact on our local economy. It's about having the reliability of knowing that if folks are coming for a weekend trip, they have choices. They could go up to Bellingham, they could go to Eastern Washington, or they could come out to the Olympic Peninsula. Without folks coming to visit, that has a definitely a negative impact on our local economy. It's also more than that, though. There are we do have an aging population out here, and I hope some of the questions do talk a little bit about healthcare accessibility. But right now, there are the I-5 corridor is sometimes the only option for folks to seek medical care, and if they don't have reliable ferries to get there, that's going to be an issue for some of our retirees that are out here on the Olympic Peninsula. At the end of the day, it does require more investment. We need reliable ferry runs that are structured in a way that people can count on. They're going to know that, and we need to continue to invest in the newer ferries that are going to sustain the amount of traffic that are back and forth, because we need it for our economy and the people of the 24th. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Tyler, you're next to discuss ferry issues.
Okay, so breakdowns, crews, and scheduling. The ferries, those are our lifeline here on the peninsula to get to the other side of the pond. We definitely need to put more effort into making it more feasible as a Department of Transportation. A lot of money does go into the ferry system, and I mean, we're looking at going green and going electric, and I'm not so sure that's the best option for us after hearing about the statewide transit systems that went electric, all the problems they're having. In the wintertime, the batteries draw down. They say they have to put diesel heaters in them. And here, that's buses in the cities in Spokane on the east side. So we're talking ferries. Hundreds of thousands of people transit the ferries every single year. We can do a lot better. And I think we have to work with our federal partners, our congressional leaders also, to help fix the problem that's been created. The state legislature does have a part in this process. We definitely need to put more thought into how we're operating there. As far as the ferry system, I know they lost a lot of people during COVID, and we haven't been replacing them as fast as they've been retiring or quitting. And we need to get a program in place that's gonna school these kids to be a seaman. I think to reach out to the high school kids that are graduating, to get them involved, to get them interested, and to get them to come aboard on the Washington State ferries for a career. So appreciate it.
Thank you. Candidate Robertson, you're up next.
Thank you. The Washington State ferries used to be the crown jewel of the transit system. It is still the largest. But in recent years, everybody's aware of the canceled ferries, the schedule delays, the loss of staff and of boats. I would propose, trying to get new ferries in line as soon as possible. And so I would support fast tracking contracts to build diesel boats, at least 2 to 5. That's the same plan that's been put out by both major candidates for governor, Dave Reichert and Bob Ferguson, and then to work on the technology and delivery of hybrids later on. And so I think it's critical to get those ferries operational. I also agree with Mr. Tyler that we need to increase the connection, the pipeline from the schools, both secondary as well as higher education, community college, technical colleges, into the Washington State Ferry system. They're great jobs, but we desperately need more people. I would also advocate that the legislature provide guidance for the executive branch to rehire many of those people who were let go during COVID because they made their own healthcare decisions. What happened, but it's a right that can be wronged. But dozens of people were fired for not taking the shot. I think in hindsight, maybe we can see that perhaps there would have been a way to accommodate those people. I also think that we should look at following the example of the BC ferry system, where the ferries are actually an independent government agency. It depoliticizes it, and it allows the ferry system to be managed on its own and make it a crown jewel once more.
Thank you. And finally, candidate Birnbaum.
Thanks for the question, Shelley. I'd like to start by affirming the value that Eric shared. It's tremendously important that we have a functioning ferry system. As Matt said, have a fantastic ferry system. I want people to come to Washington State and brag about how cool it is and how much fun it is to take the ferries here. I don't know about you all, but right now when I drive to Seattle, if I'm on some kind of a crunch, I almost always skip the ferry. It's not reliable enough. I think that's what just about everybody does. So here are a few meaningful things that we could do that provide short-term relief. One is we should work on having more partnerships with some of our local PUDs. One of the best parts of the ferry system, from my perspective, that connects at least the Kitsap Peninsula to Seattle is the fast ferry that's run by Kitsap PUD. The Washington State Legislature can provide funding for more of these local partnerships. We can make it possible for the Jefferson County, for Kitsap County Transit, for the Jefferson County Transit to create similar connectivity if they'd like to. It's not possible for us to fully replace with these local partnerships the volume of people and cars that can be carried by our main ferries. And similar to to candidate Roberson, I also support having some type of fast-tracked ferry acquisition system. And I think to its credit, the Washington State Legislature has made good progress recently by changing the way we put out some of these contracts. For a long time, one of the biggest challenges is that there's been basically one vendor in Washington State, Vigor Marine, who is the sole competitive bidder for most of our contracts. We changed contracting, so now it's a nationwide contracting process. And I want to continue to work with the state legislature as well as with our unions to see whether or not we can find other people who can be competitive bidders, and we can make sure that as we're putting these bids out, we're getting the best deal possible that are delivering ferries as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you all. So we're going to move on to a question that has also to do with some corporate mergers. Hospitals here in Washington State, and we'll have candidate Tyler kick us off. Here's the question. A recent study by the U.S. Treasury Department showed that hospital mergers led to inpatient and outpatient prices rising. None of the examples of hospital merging showed a decrease in cost to patients. As this questioner says, since mergers clearly result in rising costs for patients, what do you think needs to be done to limit hospital mergers in Washington? Candidate Tyler?
Okay, so as far as mergers, if a merger does happen, we have to definitely put protections in place to keep the quality of care, and also to keep the staff that are a part of that hospital already. Their pay should be the same, their hours should be the same. But I think it's important to keep the quality of care. Too many times you see mergers and the quality of care does go downhill. And you got to definitely have protection for a woman's right to choose. So all them things I believe have to be in place. We can't afford to allow our local hospitals to be taken over. We have to protect the Olympic Medical Center. I know they're facing quite the debt right now, but we do have to support the initiative that's going to be on the ballot to keep them whole, to help them out in every way we can possibly. From our standpoint as voters, that too is our lifeline right here on the peninsula. It was mentioned earlier. I think it was Eric Pickens mentioned that, a lot of our folks are going to Seattle for healthcare. If we lose Olympic Medical Center to a corporate merger, I think we're going to be in trouble. And we'll see a lot more patients, young and old, on the road to Seattle, to Silverdale, to Bremerton, and also Tacoma. So everything needs to be in place as far as protections if there is a merger, to keep that quality of care for us as patients.
Thank you. And we turn to candidate Robertson, hospital mergers.
Yeah, I actually would counter with the premise of the question. I don't know that every study says that it leads to increased costs, because there are recent studies in 2023 and 2022 that says there is a 2 to 4% decrease in cost per admission, and there are savings and quality of care that remain the same or get better. So I think the body of evidence is maybe mixed there. I am aware that there are some studies that do show what the questioner said, but regarding mergers itself, I support our public hospital districts. I think they're critically important in rural areas. What I don't want to do is tie the hands of our public hospital districts as they do partnerships or increase the quality of care here. Last legislative session, there was proposed legislation that dealt with hospital mergers, and Olympic Medical Center actually testified against it. So we need to be careful that as we protect local hospitals, we're not making any type of coordinated care or partnership or joint provision of services so burdensome that we actually take that away from our residents. I'd like to see us address, the hospitals here. We've talked about in other forums, of course, but things like the certificate of need regulations, many states and the federal government have repealed them to allow hospitals to really look at, what does our community need without having to go through a burdensome regulation process. And of course, we all have issues with cost reimbursement as well. And that's something that we'll have to address systematically and in the short term. Thank you.
Candidate Birnbaum, you're up next.
Thanks for the question, Shelley. I think that there's sort of two questions baked in here. One of them is about protecting patients in the cases when mergers happen. And mergers, at least the mergers that people are talking about on the Olympic Peninsula, are almost always going to be the result of the financial distress that our hospital system is under. So I want to start off by saying that we need to make sure there are ironclad protections in place that protect women's reproductive freedom, that make sure that people have access to end-of-life care in our hospitals, even if mergers occur. With that said, I think that I share some of candidate Roberson's skepticism of the premise of the question. I know that OMC and Harbor Regional Health both expressed some concerns about their ability to potentially stay solvent without having some flexibility to sell off certain parts of their businesses. For example, if you have a radiology practice in a rural district, it may make more sense to fold that radiology practice into another hospital system and to contract those services out. I'd be speaking outside of my lane to describe the specific administrative efficiencies that you gain, but my understanding talking to hospital administrators is that can be the case. So I want to make sure that as we put these protections in place, to make sure that women can continue to access these services, that we don't do it in a way that ties the hands of rural hospital districts. And I think that it's possible for us to pursue a modified version of the Keep Our Care Act, which is the legislation that candidate Robertson was referencing, that would allow us to continue to have some type of administrative review of these mergers, but to make sure that that review wasn't onerous, didn't prevent hospitals from taking drastic action to stay solvent, while also protecting women's rights in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, candidate Pickens.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think I may respectfully disagree somewhat with candidate Robertson and Birnbaum on this one a little bit, because I think it's been clearly shown that when mergers occur, it's almost always increases cost to patients. It actually is a detriment to patient care and the types of care they receive, with sometimes a higher cost, but also there is an impact to the workers in the hospitals as well. We see an erosion of benefits. We see an erosion of sometimes an erosion of pay. What I won't disagree with, and I agree with candidate Birnbaum on, is we absolutely need to prioritize end of life care. We need to prioritize reproductive freedom to make sure that is still provided at all hospitals, regardless of mergers. But in order to make sure that these aren't being done for reasons that just impact those three aspects, like I mentioned, patient eroding the quality of patient care, increasing costs, and a detriment to workers, we need to make sure that we strengthen regulatory oversight when these mergers are occurring. We need to, and it's about, it can be done with the Attorney General's office to even have more scrutiny to approve or deny hospital mergers, to make sure that they're reviewing the full impact of on competition and patient care. I'd also just support and promote transparency. I want to require all hospitals to provide detailed public reports on the potential impacts of the mergers. I want to find out all aspects of the prices, services, and access to care. And finally, with any merger that's proposed, I want to make sure that we have a process to always encourage community input, involve local communities and healthcare professionals to review the process to ensure their voices are heard and their needs are considered.
Thank you all. We did have quite a strong concern among our questioners that healthcare continue to be, well, or be more accessible and more affordable on the peninsula and in Legislative District 24. So I think we were able to touch on that broad topic as well. Thanks for those thoughtful responses. Well, from end-of-life care to early childhood education, we're going to jump to a question that is par for the course for a state legislator, because the majority of our state's property taxes go to fund education. And the second most raised topic in our community questions was schools. So here is a question for all of us to ponder. Candidate Robertson will be the first to answer. The funding of public schools in the state of Washington leaves many districts in budgetary crises as they struggle to maintain minimal levels of staffing and programming. What are some ideas that you have for providing adequate funding to public schools? Candidate Robertson.
Thank you. I think, what we've seen in recent years are more students leaving the public school system. I think it speaks to a loss of confidence in what they're receiving at schools. We've seen greater increases in homeschooling, use of private schools. And so I don't know that simply increasing funds is the silver bullet. We've massively increased funds, and I support, I believe it's the state's paramount duty to fund education. It's in the Constitution. But we also need to look at how those services being delivered. And do we have areas where overhead or administrative cost is high and those funds aren't reaching the front lines of education? And so what I would propose doing is several steps. One, I want to ensure that the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, I think it's time to narrow the remit of that office. It should be concerned with ensuring funds go to the school districts and ensuring that graduation standards are met. But as far as telling school districts what to teach or teachers how to teach, I think we need to empower school districts, parents, and teachers more, and let teachers get after it. I think we have a system that encourages growth in the school districts of lots of administrators. State average, only 51% of our school district employees are teachers. And so I think we need to allow our school districts to be flexible and deliver things for their students. It's not the case that districts that have more funding are always better at delivering results. And so I think we need to do some structural reforms with our school districts, because I don't think it's the case that more money always solves more problems. We've been trying that for years now. We're not seeing the results. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Birnbaum, you're up next.
Thanks, Shelley. It's tremendously important that we have not just an effective education system, but a fantastic education system. I want to live in a community where when people are thinking about whether or not they come here, one of the things that they don't say is, well, I don't know if I'm going to make sure, I don't know if I'm going to be preparing my kids to have the future that I want them to have because of the quality of our schools. And when you talk to people at the hospitals, a critique that they will often levy is saying, hey, it's hard for us to get physicians because they're concerned about school quality. So here are some material things that I'd like to do to change that. One is we should fully fund special education in Washington State. When we don't fully fund special education, school districts have to cannibalize money from other parts of their budget to pay for the gap that isn't covered. That means that we lose enriching programs. It means we have less money for drama, for debate. These are things that make kids want to go to school. It's how kids learn what their own strengths and weaknesses are. I also think it's important that we take a swing at some of the policies in Washington State that most disproportionately affect rural communities. We have a scheme right now where after we allocate money to public school districts, we then go to the richest school districts and we give them a little bit more. It's called regionalization. And what it does is it means that at the barrier between a wealthier district and a poorer district, the poorer district both doesn't get the money and they have to compensatorily pay more to keep up. It's not fair. It hurts rural communities more than urban communities. And it's something that we desperately need to change. So those are two of the things I'd like to change. And in the time that I've left, a third, slightly more technical change is we should have a bit of money that we put towards schools to help them apply for some of the grants. Right now, rural communities struggle to come up with the overhead costs to fund some of these grant writers relative to urban districts. It means that even at something that looks like a level playing field across districts result in rural districts getting less money than urban districts. Thank you.
All right, Candidate Pickens.
Thank you. And I'm so glad Candidate Birnbaum brought up a few of the points that I'll make. So I appreciate that. I think we're right in line on that. And so I'll just specify that fully funding special education has to be done. And sometimes I think that there's an assumption that we fully funded education in our state, and I think there's some of us that know that that's not the case. But specifically with special education, which is of course funding the needs of our most vulnerable students at times, our districts, the vast majority of our districts are funding that through other levies, which is on the local tax base to fund, which isn't what that funding is for. But the school districts have an obligation to still meet those student needs. There's a legal obligation. So if we are not funding special education, fully funding special education, we will continue to have to rely on local levies in order to meet those needs. And I actually have concerns about an over-reliance on local property taxes to fund things like that, because I believe that funding programs through those local levies creates a system of inequity that further damages the socioeconomic divide that we already currently have. And then you have some districts providing resources that other districts can't provide. We address regionalization, which is that different regions, particularly in rural districts, I believe that one zip code, the zip code of a student, should not determine the quality of education, either the educational facility or the quality of education that they are receiving. If we truly believe that education is the paramount duty of our state, then we should be funding it appropriately, regardless of what region you live in our state. And so further investment absolutely needs to be made in education, particularly in rural areas. Thank you.
Candidate Tyler.
Okay, I do appreciate that question. For I guess for myself, the importance of education starts in childcare and early childhood education. So I think we have to fully fund that also. We have to have the training in place for the staff. We have to pay the staff a living wage so they're not working 2 or 3 jobs. That's how important it is for these 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, when our teachers are preparing them for kindergarten. And as far as taxes that are going to education, I fully agree with my son was an IEP student, so special education definitely needs to be fully funded. For myself, it's a double-edged sword. Living in Nia Bay, we're relying on federal funding and also state funding, but we are at this point we're financially stable, and that's not the case in other schools that had to. The swim school, for instance, had a major deficit, had to lay off a lot of employees, and we can't get to that. We can't afford to have school districts in that position. We just seen a weeks long, if not months long, protest for the para educators in Port Angeles. Also, we shouldn't be in them positions. We need leaders in position to make the right decisions, and education needs to be fully funded. And I also do agree with Matt on what he said as far as OSPI. We have put a lot of money towards education over the course of the years, and I think it's a matter of just going through it with a fine-tooth comb and seeing if we're spending it in the right way. I think that's most important.
Thank you to all 4 candidates. That provoked some lively debate and some agreement amongst yourselves as well. I think we're going to try something a little different to break up the questions before we go on. And this is one that I'm going to call a thumbs up, thumbs down question. So this is a question that will not require a verbal response or a timer. It's a simple yes or no question. Well, maybe it's not simple, but it is a yes or no question that could be answered one way or the other, that all the candidates will answer at the same time by simply sticking their thumb into the camera field and going up or down. And I will call out your thumb gestures for the listening audience. So we just received so many questions. This is a way to try to sneak in another one. School bonds for building and maintaining schools need a 60% supermajority to pass in the local voting area, as I'm sure you're aware. While school levies for operating budgets require only a simple majority, 50% or more. Do you think this 60% rule for school bonds needs to change? Yes or no? Okay, well, that was quick and easy, folks. We got a very definite high thumbs up from each of the 4 candidates on this one. When I was doing some research on this, I found out that for a while in Washington State, well, for many years, school levies also required a 60% supermajority, but the legislator voted to change that. So that is exactly something that our state legislators could do for our schools. All right, well, that was fun. Maybe we'll do another one down the road. With that, then, we are going to move on to another in-depth policy question. And candidate Tyler will take this first. And it has to do with something you are extremely familiar with. So I'm curious to hear how you kick off this question. It's about the tribes. The question says, tribal nations are some of the largest employers in the 24th Legislative District. How will you, if elected, work with the tribes to ensure equitable communications, support services, and improve job creation. So candidate Tyler, kick this off.
All right. So, that is definitely a question near and dear to tribes. We have 29 federally recognized tribes in Washington State. We also have the Nez Perce tribe, Umatilla tribe, and Warm Spring tribe that has rights in Washington State. So 32 tribes that we should all be working with, especially when it impacts them. So anytime anything comes up that is going to impact the tribe should be brought into the equation before the discussion even starts. That's how important it is to tribes. That's the only, and we haven't had a good relationship with the state or vice versa until fairly recently. So we do have the tribes do work with the governor. Has a centennial accord once a year. The tribes also work with DNR and have a natural resources accord once a year. And the governor does have his Craig Bill, his tribal liaison, who is there to reach out to tribes and vice versa anytime tribes are going to be impacted and that's important. You mentioned the economy, the tribes. For the most part, I don't know what the total number is that they bring to the economy, but I think it's like $6 billion. They are some of the biggest employers throughout the state, probably one of the biggest employers throughout the state. So it's important to have working relationships. It's important to work together. It's important to meet as often as you can. And when we do meet with the governor as tribal leaders, there are current state legislators or senators that are part of the meetings and also part of the DNR and the Centennial Accord. So it's important to form them relationships and keep them going from here on out.
Thank you. Candidate Robertson, you're up next.
Yeah, I think it starts with respect. They do have treaty rights. They are separate sovereigns from the state. And so, I agree with Nate. It's about communication often and early, and that's how dialogue forms. I've had the opportunity as a deputy prosecutor to work with many of the tribes in Clallam County with their law enforcement, with their prosecutors' offices. We have a great partnership with the Lower Elwha tribe, who operates a pediatric SART clinic for sexual assault investigations and strangulation cases. So it's a great resource. And so I think communication is important. If elected, I'll have an open door policy for my constituents. That includes the tribes. I think it's important to have not just the government to government meetings that the governor has, but to, make sure those constituent services are open as well. My family uses one of the tribal child care providers as our child care. So I'm always on the reservation there. And it's just a relationship. I think there's areas we could work together. The Jamestown S'Klallam tribe provides an important resource, not just for substance use in the Sequim area, but they're the only ones providing the mobile clinic out to the Clallam Bay area. And so there's so many areas where the tribe is able to help out or carry the load, including economic development. And so they'll find a willing partner in me. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Birnbaum.
Thanks, Shelley. To echo what both candidate Robertson and candidate Tyler said, consultation is tremendously important with the tribes. I like to think about if we were planning on having some kind of policy that was happening in Canada, what's the level of respect and consultation we would have if that was what we were talking about. That should be the same frame that we have when we're talking about our tribal partnerships. So making sure that there's some humility when we're having these conversations, that we're inviting the tribes to the table whenever there's a policy that we think might affect the tribal sovereignty or that the tribes might be interested in. and also having regular conversation to see what the tribe's own plans are and how the state can be a good partner with them. I think that the tribes are a tremendous source of economic strength in our community. For our healthcare system, they are absolutely vital. I can't imagine where we would be right now, or actually, we have some precedent to see where we would be if it weren't for the MAT clinic that the Jamestown Slalom opened up. Like candidate Robertson said, the mobile services that are being provided in Clallam Bay, it's also only possible because of the work that the tribes are putting in. So making sure that it's not just a relationship where when there is a policy around fisheries or around hunting issues that we talk to the tribes, but creating the kind of trust that we need. So whenever we're having a conversation about any policy issue, we're thinking about the tribes as good faith collaborators. We're seeing what ideas they have for the community, and we're seeing how we can best support them. I think that means expanding the relationship and the communication beyond just something that happens during the legislative session, having regular communications that we're having with tribal leaders. That's something that I'm excited to do. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. And candidate Pickens.
Thank you. I think it starts with supporting tribal sovereignty. We do need to respect and reinforce tribal sovereignty and their ability to self-govern, number one. Then it comes to regular communication. And that's something I'm very proud of that we've done here at the Sequim School District with partnering with Jamestown. But I think it's more than just, it's very easy to say regular communication and consultation. It's what do you then do with that is the next step. And here at the school district level, of course, it was about meeting the needs of the students and the unique needs. But for the legislature, I think we need to take it a step further. And that is economic development partnerships to collaborate in joint economic development projects that sometimes will include infrastructure, renewable industry, tourism, and making sure that we're creating jobs. And the second step would be workforce development, so that we are investing in workforce training, education programs. We're collaborative in that one, and we are addressing the needs of our tribal communities. If we're really going to be partners with our tribes, we need to make sure that we understand the needs. Again, first we have to start with that communication, but then what do we do with it? Economic development partnerships and workforce development, meeting the needs of the tribes based on how we collaborate with them. So I appreciate the question.
All right. Well, time for another question. Switching gears, we're going to talk about human rights. Given recent state and court rulings that infringe on the rights of women and LGBTQ plus individuals, what legislation and initiatives will you support to ensure that all people are able to join in things like state-sanctioned marital union, control of their own bodies, and equal rights and freedoms? Candidate Pickens is going to start us. Let's see, Candidate Pickens just finished that one. Did I? Nope, that's it. You get to start. So Candidate Pickens, you've come around to the top again.
All right, thank you. I'm glad that this question got asked because I am very supportive of making sure that we are protecting reproductive freedoms, protecting the rights of LGBTQ plus individuals. I believe that there is a notion in because our state is what it is, that those are already protected. But I want to be the first to say that I believe that there are some concerns with that, particularly in rural areas specifically. And being the father of two kiddos that fall under the LGBTQ plus umbrella, this one really hits home for me. And this is one of the reasons why, and I believe I'm the only candidate here that on my platform, I was very public about being an advocate for the rights of LGBTQ plus youth. Right now, we still have, especially our children are under an immense amount of scrutiny, and Sometimes there's bullying that's still happening in schools. Sometimes it's leading to physical violence. I remember this actually came up in a forum previous to this that there have been situations of violence against students specifically because of this. We need to make sure that we are protecting students, but also protecting all individuals, of course. We need to make sure all are protected. I want to make sure that we have appropriate health care for our transgender students as well. I think that's particularly important. There's a lot of health care needs that are specific to rural areas, and that's one of those that's actually underserved. And then last thing I'll just say is behavioral health. Right now, if you look at our LGBTQ population, they are the most susceptible for suicide. We need to make sure that we have adequate care for them from a behavioral health perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for sharing that personal story too. Candidate Tyler.
Okay, so I do appreciate this question. This is pretty near and dear to me also. When I first filed, I asked a good friend of mine, of myself, I asked his son if he'd be my legislative assistant if I won, and he's gay. I think it's important that they're at the table. Protecting all these rights. I've been as a tribal leader. I sat on the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board, and that represents 43 tribes in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And I also sat on the National Indian Health Board, overseeing issues like this, advocating and lobbying for these protections. So we've been doing that. We've been passing resolutions. We've been meeting with senators on both sides of the aisle. And that's as many senators as we can reach. That's not just our own senators in our district. That's senators in all states from the west side of the east side. And we're lobbying and advocating for these protections. And that's how important it is to us. You look at a lot of the issues that we're facing on homelessness. A lot of them are LGBTQ. And like Eric said, it's dealing with getting bullied, getting beat up, families not accepting them, dang near getting murdered, and they're only out is to hit the streets and to hide. So they're lacking services as far as mental health and behavioral health, and they're homeless. So we're seeing a bigger issue overall because we're not fully protecting them. So like I said, I believe they belong at the table, and if I win, he's going to be at the table. So I do appreciate that. Thanks.
Good to know. Candidate Robertson.
Yes. So, I believe in, protecting the decisions that our voters have made through the initiative process. And that means upholding same-sex marriages and upholding a woman's right to choose. And so I don't think voters should be concerned in those areas, whichever candidate gets the position, because I think all of us would oppose attempts to turn those back. And so, what I want to focus on is I think we have to really focus on, as a state, of course, there are court decisions that we have to obey. And no, I don't think anybody's proposing that we don't. But navigating that tension sometimes that happens between one person's rights versus another person's rights, and that's delicate to do. But we have to navigate it. And of course, we have to protect people's safety and healthcare. And so as a deputy prosecutor, I've done that. I've utilized Washington's hate crimes legislation before to prosecute cases. So I have no qualms about doing that. And thank you for the question.
Thank you. Candidate Birnbaum, you'll finish this out here.
Thanks, Shelley. So I think that there's a few things that we should do to make sure that LGBTQ people and LGBTQ kids in particular in rural communities feel protected and supported and affirmed. And let me also say at the beginning to touch on something that candidate Tyler talked about. It's important that we have consultation and that whenever we're making policies, we don't assume that we're a subject matter expert. We invite other people to the table and we ask members of whatever community the policies that we're making touch what they want to see, what their aspirations are for state policy. Here are a few of the things that people have shared with me they want to see the state legislature do that I support. So one of them is I want to remove some of the autonomy that local school districts have to remove certain books from classrooms, to create conditions that make it so kids don't feel affirmed. I think this is a bigger issue in rural districts that tend to lean more conservative than it is in urban districts. And I think that we end up leaving a lot of kids out by not making policy or not having taken state policy that makes sure that no matter who you are or where you grew up, you're in an environment that feels supportive. And the same thing goes, frankly, when we're talking about abortion care and other services for women. There's a much greater risk that federal court action could lead to healthcare providers withdrawing from rural communities and making it challenging to provide these services. Where there's duplication of services, it's easier to find those supportive spaces. One of the other changes that I'd like to see us make is providing a lot more healthcare and behavioral healthcare for LGBTQ kids. This is a place where our broader inability to provide these services adequately really does affect kids' mental health. I mean, it's heartbreaking when teenagers commit suicide, in part because like they never got that chance to grow to an age to see sometimes how small the problems seem in retrospect. Getting kids that bridge, letting them get there, I think is tremendously important. I support that too.
Thank you all. And we are now coming to the part of the forum where we need to wrap up at the top of the hour. And I think we've had some great meaty questions and answers. I'm going to ask if our timer could actually pop up a 1-minute timer, because I did come up with a short form question that I'd like to ask each of you before we move into closing statements tonight. If that's not possible, please just try to watch the timer and limit yourself to 1 minute. Thank you. And it's simply this. I would love for candidate Robertson to start, followed by Birnbaum, Pickens, and Tyler, and just tell us how you will seek input from your constituents if elected. So candidate Robertson, can you riff for a minute on that?
Yes. I've always had pretty much an open door policy in my current role as a deputy prosecutor. Somebody wants to come by to talk about a case. Can't talk about details, but I can talk generally about the process. Or somebody wants to even, give feedback, whether it's critical or supportive. I've always been there to hear it. I think it's a shame that what happens in politics, especially national politics, is you have legislators who don't meet with their constituents, who don't go to forums, who don't go to places where they might face some criticism. There needs to be that listening that happens because, we're not grand poobahs. We're just people, and we put our pants on the same way as everybody else. And so I think I would be try to be back in the district, going around everywhere from Ocean Shores to Montesano to Fort Townsend and Forks and everywhere in between, having those town halls, having those listening forums. I know our legislators have tried to do it via phone, but I try to do as much in person. And sorry if I went long there.
That's good. We're trying this out. Thanks so much. Good answers. Candidate Birnbaum, connecting with constituents.
Thank you, Shelley. I've had some time to reflect on this working as a legislative assistant. I think one important thing that candidate Robertson touched on is making sure that you have an open door policy. You answer your phone when it rings. You try to do your best to get back to people in a timely manner. And you answer honestly. I think one of the hardest things in politics to do is to go into a room full of people where some folks are going to disagree, and still tell them why you think, what the assumptions are that informed your decision, and be able to articulate to people what would change your mind. And if you don't have a framework on your own for why you might be wrong, you probably become blinkered. Mechanically, there's a lot of stuff that I think that we ought to do, that I would like to do too. I'd like to spend more time in person in the community. I'd like to have weekly coffees, in particular during interim, where you can sit down and people know that you're going to be at a certain place, and do it across the district because it is a big area. And just because you're hearing a lot from people in Port Angeles and Sequim doesn't mean that those are the same issues that matter to people in Ocean Shores and Aberdeen and Hoquiam. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Pickens, connecting with constituents.
Thank you so much for asking this question. I appreciate it. Yes, tremendously important, both on a one-on-one basis, group forum basis. I'm supportive of all those formats. In fact, see, I don't see myself as a career politician in any sense of the word. I'm a teacher. I'm a dad. Husband, I want to be able to connect with the constituents I represent. That's essentially why I'm doing this. I also would want to say, I think it's important both inside and outside of the legislative session to make those connections. So when you're outside the legislation session, that should be, the input you're gathering to find out what you still need to advocate for, where improvements need to be made. But then inside of the legislative session, sometimes you don't see certain bills coming. And I want to be proactive in reaching out to individuals so I fully know, okay, how is this going to impact you? Whether it be an entire labor organization or one individual. Is this something that's going to meet your needs or resolve your concerns? So just want to say both inside and outside of the legislation. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Candidate Tyler was going to, he's back on the air.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I do appreciate that question. The one guy I do see all the time up and down the peninsula, Port Angeles, from here to Hoquiam, is Mike Chapman. So I do get a chance to talk to him quite a bit. During a 60-day session, I personally, I'm all over the place also. Family up and down the coast, have to go to Port Angeles all the time anyways. And that would be time for me to reach out to constituents and talk to them. And I'd still have that open door policy. I know my son in high school called Vandaway and reached his legislative assistant. He thought he could just call him and talk with him. And that's not the case. You have that legislative assistant, answering the phone, taking notes and everything. So he didn't get to talk to him, but I thought that was pretty funny. He was 16 years old, I believe. Definitely have an open door policy, working with the Clown County, our county commissioners also, and our local officials, to hear what they're hearing, and working with them, I think, is also important, just as important as working with constituents throughout the 3 counties. But
we're out of time, so perfect.
Phone calls.
Well, our elected officials are just people, as you say. And I thank all of you for being so approachable here tonight, honest and open, and great communicators. We have a chance to hear closing statements from each of you. Each of you has 2 minutes, and we will go in the opposite order from your opening statements. So that means that candidate Tyler will go first, followed by Pickens, Birnbaum, and Robertson. So candidate Tyler, there he is, keeps coming in and out. All that cell phone signal out of Nia Bay. Okay, here you are. Let's wrap up our forum with some closing remarks, please.
Okay, so just once again, I appreciate having this chance to meet with the forum here tonight with all the people on Zoom. It's important, to have these forums, to hear from individuals, do your background on individuals. I feel that my 12 years of leadership fully prepared me to step right into the state legislature from day one and continue doing what I've been doing, for the past 12 years as a tribal leader. That's working towards access to mental health, access to behavioral health, access to treatment, fentanyl, opioids, what we're seeing today. Also, dealing with this homelessness, putting programs in place. I mean, we've been pushing this issue, and it became a humongous issue during COVID. A lot of these things, broadband became a humongous issue during COVID. But we were actually working on all these issues prior to, and then they became a national issue. So that put everything on, right on the stage, for the president to appropriate funding towards some of these issues. And we've made headway. So I'm just asking for people to support me because I've actually been doing all these, whether it's with our state legislators or our federal partners. And I'll continue doing that. We have a lot of issues that we're facing today. You heard all of our issues the last couple forums are pretty much everything's in common. Housing, treatment, public safety, healthcare. So, and it's even more so for us on the coast from here to Hoquiam. So I just want a chance to continue working in the field that I've been doing the last 12 years and try changing some lives, addressing these issues. So I do appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Candidate Pickens.
Yeah, really just appreciate the time here. This has been the time actually flew by, but I'll just share that in the game of politics, sometimes incremental progress is better than no progress, and it's often the long game is to make big changes. Sometimes we need to work towards compromise and bipartisanship, but not at the expense of the planet, not at the expense of reproductive rights, LGBTQ plus rights, civil rights, collective bargaining, or other worker rights. And I look forward to finding common ground with other legislators, including those across the aisle. But I do have principles that I will not compromise. And let's be honest, there are folks in our state legislature who want to take away rights from women, who want to force LGBTQ plus Washingtonians out of public life and back into the closet, who want to erase parts of American history from education. We do not need to compromise with those individuals. We need to provide a competing vision that is based on tolerance and respect for one another. And we need legislators like myself who will stand up for what is right when necessary and not try to find the middle position. So I appreciate being here, and more importantly, I want to ask for your vote when ballots get mailed out coming up on the 19th of this month, and thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Candidate Birnbaum, please go ahead with your closing statement.
Thank you all again for taking the time to listen to me and the other candidates tonight. You've heard about many problems our community is facing over the last couple hours, but let me talk about something that hasn't come up as much. It's something I've been reminded of over the last few months as I've talked to thousands of people at their doors. In those conversations, many people have shared their hopes and struggles with me. I talked to 2 young parents a little while ago who never thought they'd be able to afford a home, but because of our state's investment in the Housing Trust Fund, they now own a home they built with Habitat for Humanity. I'm sharing this story because it highlights how the decisions we make in Olympia can better the lives of people in our community. The key fact is this: we don't need policy solutions because our communities are broken. We need them because of how great our communities already are. What we need are representatives who can find realistic solutions, not aspirational ones. The challenge of politics isn't just in expressing values or identifying problems. It's in weighing many competing needs and priorities. I've tried to honor that challenge in the way I've answered these questions tonight. I haven't given vague value statements. I've tried to speak honestly and provide meaningful details about policy solutions. I'm running for office because I believe my experience in Olympia and as a policy analyst have prepared me to effectively advocate for our community. Whoever you send to Olympia will have to navigate a legislature filled with representatives from Seattle and Tacoma. The jobs of those representatives is to bring home resources for their communities. If you send me to Olympia, I will fight tenaciously for our community. I will fight to change policies that hurt rural communities and to bring home resources here to the Olympic Peninsula. I've been a tireless advocate for rural communities, a tireless campaigner, and if you send me to Olympia, I will fight as hard as I can for you. I humbly ask for your vote.
Thank you. And finally, Candidate Robertson, your closing statement, please.
Thank you, Shelley. And thank you for your time and participation tonight, to those of you listening. For me, it's really about a positive vision for Washington State. I believe that this state could be a safer, stronger, and more affordable place to live with great schools and great jobs. But I don't think we're going to get there by more of the same. For over 2 decades, we've had the same tired ideas, the same tired solutions, and we see the same results. I'm asking for your support because I want to do something different. Over the past time I've been in the deputy prosecutor's office, I know what it's like to tenaciously go after into the courtroom and advocate for vulnerable victims. I want to turn the same tenacity and the same advocacy skills to you, that my constituents and fellow citizens. If you send me to Olympia, you're going to have a person who will fight on your behalf, who will advocate for greater community safety, for more treatment, for less regulation and simplified processes for home development, economic development, and for trying to keep costs of living as low as possible for you. I had the opportunity to meet amazing voters as I door knock like Adam has, and it's the story sticking with me. It's the grandpa who's retired and has to go back to work because he's raising his son's children after his son had to step out of the picture with a drug addiction. And that sticks with me. And, I'm running for people like that gentleman to ensure that his kids and his grandkids have a better future. And not that life would be easy, but maybe our legislature wouldn't make it so difficult. So my name is Matt Robertson, and I'd ask for your vote this August and November. Thank you.
All right. Well, it's back to me to wrap it up. Stay with us for a few more minutes, and at the top of the hour, we will be done. But thank you, everyone, for attending what turned out to be a very focused policy discussion. And thank you, candidates, for your thoughtful and very on-point answers. I feel really fortunate that we have such a strong slate of candidates running for this position. And so I think we will be well served by whichever one of you makes it up there. If you found this forum helpful, if you are in the listening or watching audience, please share the recording with others, because our goal is more informed voters. So these candidates have taken the bold act of running, and now it's our turn to do the voting. Ballots will be mailed out soon. July 17th is the date. Watch for them in your mailbox. You can mail them back or place them in one of the many drop boxes throughout the counties. On primary election day, which is August 6th. So that's your deadline for returning your ballot, August 6th. If you're not yet registered to vote, go to votewa.gov to get that done, either online or in mail through July 29th, or in person at your local county courthouse until Election Day on August 6th. And if you're not sure about your voter registration status, you can also check that on the votewa.gov website. Maybe you moved recently and you need to make sure that you are registered to vote here for these candidates. As mentioned, this forum has been recorded. Thank you, tech team. And in a few days, it will be posted as a link on the websites of the League of Women Voters Clallam County and the League of Women Voters Jefferson County. And each of these fine organizations is in the 21st century with YouTube channels. So go to YouTube and search for those, your local county League of Women Voters channel, and you can watch them there. There's already some candidate forums for other offices, so you can watch those while you're there as well. Please share the recording with friends who are unable to join us live. We know that's not possible for everyone, but for all of you who took the time out of this very warm Tuesday evening to be with us, we thank you. I want to thank the numerous volunteers who helped put this on and worked very hard to put it together. Don't miss our subsequent forums this election season. And thanks again to all the candidates for being here tonight. We really appreciate you. So it is now time for those of you listening on KPTZ 91.9 FM, Port Townsend's community radio, to return to regularly scheduled program. And it's time for us here on the Zoom to call it a wrap. Thank you and good night.